Have you ever wondered how a seemingly minor act, entering through a window, could spark one of the most explosive political scandals in American history? This is the story of Harvey Milk, a trailblazing politician, a voice for the voiceless and the shocking series of events that led to his assassination, events that still ripple through American society today. Harvey Milk wasn't just any politician. He was the first openly gay elected official in California, winning a seat on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1977. Charismatic, defiant, and unyielding in his fight for equality, Milk quickly became a beacon of hope for the LGBTQ+ community during an era when such visibility was rare and dangerous. But in the shadows of Milk's rise was a man spiraling downward, Dan White. A former police officer and firefighter, White also served on the Board of Supervisors. At first, he and Milk seemed to get along, two men from starkly different worlds, brought together by public service. But tensions grew. White, conservative and traditional, found himself increasingly at odds with the progressive direction San Francisco was taking. And when he resigned from the board in a fit of frustration, then demanded his position back days later, his desperation began to ferment into something darker. Mayor George Moscone, influenced by Milk and others, refused to reinstate White. That decision, made on a cold November morning in 1978, would prove fatal. On November 27th, Dan White entered San Francisco City Hall through a basement window, avoiding metal detectors and security. He was armed with a .38 caliber revolver. White first approached Mayor Moscone in his office. After a short exchange, he pulled out his weapon and shot the mayor multiple times, once in the shoulder, twice in the head at close range. Then he walked briskly down the hall to Harvey Milk's office. Milk likely didn't suspect a thing. White shot him 5 times. One bullet passed through Milk's wrist and into his chest. 2 more hit him in the back. The final 2 bullets were fired with the barrel of the gun pressed directly against Milk's skull. San Francisco was in shock. 2 of its leaders, murdered in broad daylight in the very building meant to symbolize democracy and order. But the story didn't end there. In fact, it was just beginning. Dan White turned himself in within hours, but what followed stunned the nation even more than the murders themselves. At his trial, White's defense argued he was suffering from diminished capacity. One of their key pieces of evidence? His sudden shift to eating junk food, sugary snacks and soda, a supposed sign of his declining mental state. It would later be dubbed the Twinkie Defense. Despite confessing to the killings, Dan White was not convicted of murder. Instead, the jury found him guilty of voluntary manslaughter, sentencing him to just 7 years and 8 months in prison. He served only 5. The verdict ignited the White Night riots, one of the most intense uprisings in San Francisco's history. Thousands flooded the streets, clashing with police, torching vehicles, and storming City Hall. It was a roar of anguish from a community that had lost its champion, and now saw justice denied. Harvey Milk's legacy, however, only grew. He had recorded a message months before his death, in which he eerily acknowledged the very real possibility that he might be killed. "If a bullet should enter my brain," he said, "let that bullet destroy every closet door." Today, Harvey Milk is remembered not as a victim, but as a visionary. Schools, streets, and even a U.S. Navy ship now bear his name. His story is taught in classrooms, celebrated in documentaries, and etched into the fight for civil rights. Dan White, on the other hand, faded into obscurity. He was released from prison in 1984 and died by suicide a year later. So ask yourself, how did one man's desperate grab for control collide with another man's courageous stand for freedom and end in tragedy? And more importantly, what lessons are we still learning from the enigmatic shooting of Harvey Milk? Thanks for joining us on this epic time journey.